Hello, and welcome to the Clandestine Podcast. My name is Gabriel.
And I'm Olivia.
On this podcast, we cover true crime and other horror content. Sometimes the topics we talk about can get pretty graphic, so listener discretion is advised. Reminder that all information we cite is public information and sources will be in the description. We have the utmost respect for survivors, victims, and their families. Well, sorry for the busyness this week, everybody out there. We
took a little bit of a break. We wanted to kind of regroup a little bit, but hopefully you will have just heard our theme music.
Yes.
Intro music.
Yes, we got cool little intro music going in now. Like we said, though, life outside of the podcasting has been busy.
Yes, we do have full-time jobs, both of us, so it gets hard sometimes.
And on the weekends come, and we got things to do still. But we're back. We got some episodes coming for you, and our lovely lady Olivia is bringing the story tonight for us. She's been wanting to tell me all. Olivia does this thing where she's like, Can I tell you? I'm like, no, don't tell. And then she asked me who I'm doing mine on.
Yeah, we were just at dinner, and I was already revealing too much information about the case.
Yeah, I was like, stop. So, without further ado, what have you got for us?
Yeah, I'll just get into it. So, big shout out to the author James Renner, who wrote the book Amy, My Search for Her Killer, which was my primary source for this episode. Also, the documentary The Lake Erie Murders, the first 3 episodes, which James Renner was also in. I also used those as sources, along with a few other things.
How eerie.
Yeah. Also, I just want to say right now that there's a lot of quotes in this episode, and some of them I took from either the documentary or the book. And I have edited the quotes a little bit so they're not exact quotes, just for brevity purposes. So I just want to get that out of the way.
You say brevity?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Like, to keep it brief. Anyway, I'll just go ahead and get started. Who we're going to be talking about today is Amy Mihaljevic.
Mihaljevic?
Yes. And she was born December 11th, 1978 in Little Rock, Arkansas, to parents Mark Mihaljevic and Margaret McNulty. She had an older brother by 2 years who was named Jason.
Jason Mihaljevic.
Yep. When Amy was 3 years old, the family moved to Bay Village in Ohio, which was at the time voted one of America's safest communities.
Whoa.
She was known by her friends and family as extremely smart, extremely funny, and very cool. Amy's brother Jason said of her, quote, "She was a little spitfire. We had just started to become friends. She was very popular at school, very outgoing. She was known to be very caring for others and just a really sweet little girl. Her favorite show was The Monkees, and Davy Jones was her favorite. She had a huge collection of My Little Pony figures displayed in her room. One of Amy's best friends was named Kristen Sabo, and her mother, Jean, said, quote, "Kristen and Amy used to watch the movie Dirty Dancing. The two of them would snuggle together in the same chair. Kristen would have her blanket, Amy would have her arm around her, and I would just look at them and think, oh my god, these kids are so precious. Life is so good. It never occurred to me that anything bad could happen."
Were you ever crazy for Swayze?
Personally, no. I actually am a bigger fan of Dirty Dancing 2 Havana Nights.
What? I think we talked about this, and first of all, that one definitely sucked compared to the first Dirty Dancing. I'm just saying.
I love Havana Nights. It's so good. just
because I'm going to keep talking about it, I just want to say, I thought that
Patrick Swayze is in it.
I thought he was so cool in that movie when I was younger, even though it may have been...
Dirty Dancing 2 Havana Nights?
No, not Dirty Dancing 2 Havana Nights. Dirty Dancing. The first one. The good one. I was references to that, but that's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you. So Amy had a unique taste for old things, like her blue and white bike that was probably 30 years older than the bikes of her peers.
Oh.
Unlike most 10-year-olds, Amy loved antiques, which I thought was so cool. Her childhood friend, Kristen Ballas, told James Renner, quote, "She didn't care if anyone made fun of her on that bike. She was into that. She was really artsy." Her father, Mark, told Renner, quote, "Amy always had the can-do attitude. She thought she could do everything. If she knew how to do it, she didn't want any help doing it. And she was very quiet. Amy wouldn't talk when a stranger came into the house. She wasn't afraid of much, though. Amy was jumping off the high dive at 5 years old. She acquired the nickname Moose sometime around then. Don't remember how that came about.
Moose?
Yeah. Amy was smart. End quote. She was in the gifted program at school and was taking accelerated classes in English and math, and she also loved her science class. But she had a passion for the arts as well. She loved drawing and ceramics.
It seems like even from a young age, like a jack of all trades.
Yes, and she seems so cool. And I wanted to include the part about the high dive because I did not jump off the high dive until I was like 18 years old.
Last weekend.
Yeah. But above all, Amy loved horses, and she spent most of her free time outside of school at Holly Hills Farms.
She's a horse girl.
Yeah, horse girl. She rode a horse named Razzle at the stables and was a very gifted horseback rider, especially for her age. Amy would go there often, even if she didn't have lessons, just to watch other riders or to brush the horses. So this was just kind of weird. I was debating on whether or not I wanted to include this part in it, because it's not, whatever, I'll just say it.
Okay.
Christy S., and Amy spent a lot of the summer of 1989 together. One night when Amy was sleeping over at Christy's, she suggested they play with a Ouija board.
I've never used one, and I never will. I don't like, I don't like that stuff.
Yeah. Christy, in the documentary The Lake Erie Murders, she says that Amy asked the board when she would die, and the board spelled out SOON.
Soon.
Yeah. About a week before October 27th, 1989, the Mihaljevic family home received a phone call from a man who some sources say called himself Frank. Amy and Jason were latchkey kids. Do you know what that is?
What is it? Because I feel like I do.
Latchkey kids, it was mostly a term for Gen X kids, and they would ride the bus, ride their bike, whatever, home.
Yeah.
And have a key to the house and stay in the house until their mom or dad came home.
Okay.
Yeah. Jason's classes got out 1 hour after Amy's because he was a little bit older. So Amy would usually be home alone until Jason came home, which would be about an hour. During that time was when this call came in. So the man on the phone told Amy he was a coworker of her mother's and that she had just gotten a promotion. And wouldn't it be so special if he picked Amy up after school one day to take her shopping and pick out a present for her mom? Hey, he told Amy that she could pick out something for herself, too.
Yeah, on paper, it sounds great.
Yeah. Amy loved her mother deeply. They were very close, and she would have done anything for her. The Mihaljevics had just told young Jason and Amy that they would be going forward with getting a divorce. So perhaps Amy may have been especially susceptible to the ruse because of this. Maybe she wanted to cheer her mom up and thought this was a great way to do that. So, of course, the man told her not to tell anyone about their secret present buying excursion so as not to ruin the surprise. Amy agreed with that and chose not to tell her family, but she did tell her friends all about it.
Well, at least somebody knew.
Friday, October 27th, 1989, was the day school pictures had come back from picture day earlier that month. She had told her friend Kristen B that she didn't like the picture and she was going to take a new one on picture retake day. Kristen B was one of the friends Amy had told about the man on the phone, and she had told her about him a few days before she went missing. On that Friday, Rookie Officer Mark Spatzel held a presentation for Amy and her classmates on behalf of the local police department to warn them about stranger danger.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if this is still the case because James Renner's book was published in 2006, but at least at that time, Spatzel was actually the last remaining Bay Village police officer from the original investigation still assigned to the case.
Whoa.
After school on October 27th, 1989, Amy and a group of friends walked to the Baskin-Robbins ice cream shop in the shopping plaza right down the street from the school, which also happened to be right across the street from the police station. The shop was very close to the school, obviously, and many kids from the middle school would congregate there during after-school hours. So she was waiting for this mysterious man in front of Baskin-Robbins for around an hour. She was last seen twirling around a telephone pole in front of the store before a man came up to her and led her away towards the parking lot. And that was the last anybody saw of her. Jason, her older brother, he was in 7th grade at the time, and he was actually planning to go to Baskin-Robbins after school that day because he had a free ice cream cone birthday coupon that he wanted to use that day. So he was heading to the ice cream shop, but on his way he saw some school bullies, so he decided that today was not the day that he was going to be using the coupon.
It was not the day for the coupon.
Yeah, so he turned around and he headed home. He said, quote, "If I had maybe been there, could I have changed the situation? It's one of those questions you'll never be able to answer, but it still races through your mind."
Yeah.
Jason got home around 3:20 p.m. and called his mother at work to tell her Amy wasn't at home, and it looked like she hadn't been home since that morning. And Margaret was so worried by this that she started preparing her things to leave work early. As she was doing so, though, she actually received a call from Amy herself. So she picks up the phone. Amy tells her mother that she wasn't home at the normal time because she was at choir tryouts. Margaret said later that at this point she assumed Amy was calling from home, but remember, there's no caller ID.
You're
So she said Amy sounded strange, but not necessarily in distress or anything like that. Just like she wanted to wrap up the conversation quickly.
Yeah.
Margaret's fears were calmed a little bit by this, but she was already gathering up her stuff. She's already kind of on edge, so she's like, you know what? I'm still going to leave work early today and just make sure everything's okay at home. When she arrived at the house, Jason was waiting there to tell her that no, Amy had not come home at all. Still, and she had not called on the house phone either. So Margaret raced to the school to find Amy's blue and white bike still on the bike rack. After that, she went to the police station and reported her daughter missing. So this is like so heartbreaking. By 11 p.m. that night, Amy's face appeared on the 11 o'clock news in Cleveland. The Sabos, Christy Sabo and her mother Jean, they were actually neighbors of the Mihaljevics. The families were really close. And Jean actually went to the Channel 3 news station and insisted that they show Amy's picture that night. They were kind of giving her a little bit of pushback because they said she hadn't been gone for long enough. But like I said, Jean, she insisted. So they did end up showing her picture that night. Jean says as she pulled into the neighborhood after leaving the news station, she could hear Amy's mother screaming because her daughter's photo was on the news, just in like pain. The FBI were heavily involved in this case from very early on, which looked kind of odd to some people on the outside because there were never any ransom demands and no indication that Amy had crossed over state lines, which are typically the type of cases the FBI will get involved in. There were over 40 FBI agents brought in from the jump to help case neighborhoods, interview suspects and witnesses, and search for clues of where Amy was and who took her.
I feel like that's unheard of.
It's pretty rare, yeah.
Yeah.
FBI agent Dick Renner said at the time that many of the agents on the case were based in Bay Village, so that's why they were able to pull their resources and focus on this case. Some have their doubts as to why the FBI was so involved. The Bay Village chief of police in 1989, William Garreau, told Renner when they asked why so many FBI agents were involved in this case, quote, "They owed us. We held some prisoners for them." Not sure what that means.
Oh. Huh.
Some people speculate that perhaps someone in local law enforcement could have been involved in perpetrating the crime, which would potentially explain why the FBI were so involved.
There's a good point.
Amy and the man in front of the ice cream store were seen by at least 2 witnesses whose descriptions were used to make a composite sketch of the man. The man they described was white, in his early 30s to mid 40s. He was about 5'8" to 5'10" inches tall, of medium build, slightly muscular, and had dark, kind of wavy hair that was possibly starting to gray and possibly was starting to bald. One witness said that he was wearing round-shaped glasses, but the other witness did not remember him wearing glasses at all. The Bay Village community came together to form the Amy Center to help find any information that could lead to the discovery of Amy. Her case was featured on the TV show America's Most Wanted because of the Amy Center's work. On December 11th, 1989, Amy's golden 11th birthday, her mother wrote this letter to her daughter. And brace yourself because it's devastatingly sad. Quote, "To our dearest darling Amy, happy birthday. Since you aren't here at the moment and we don't know the address, we decided the only way we'd get birthday greetings to you was this way. We know from birthdays past that you would choose spaghetti for your meal, an angel food cake with confetti frosting. So in your honor, that's what we'll be having. Don't worry, we'll save some for you too. One thing we won't tell you is what your present is. You'll have to come home to find what that is. In our hearts, we know that instead of a box to unwrap, you only want one thing for your birthday, to come home. We are here, waiting for you, sweetie. Until then, our gift to you is lots and lots of love and prayers for your safety and well-being. We miss you so much."
That's so sad.
Yeah.
I
didn't emphasize it, but this was her golden birthday, her 11th birthday on December 11th.
Oh.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Profilers believe the perpetrator must have had some sort of information to make Amy trust him, because her friends and family all agreed she was street smart as well as book smart, and she was not the type of kid to just go off with a complete stranger. Hydrate.
That's a good point too. I have a feeling obviously you're getting there. It's just, it's so like a random guy that went by Frank.
And some sources say that he went by Frank, but
right, you said some sort. It's bizarre sounding.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely eager to hear what happens.
This man knew the Mihaljevic home phone number and knew to call when Amy would be home alone. So what else did he know about Amy and her life? The man told Amy that he worked with her mother and that she had gotten a promotion at work, which was why he wanted to take Amy to pick out a present. Amy's mother hadn't gotten a promotion, but over the summer, she had gone from working part-time to full-time. Was this a pure coincidence, or did the man know this? I'm assuming that Amy knew about this, because, her mom went from not working as much to working more, but she probably wouldn't have understood that is different than getting a promotion. Amy was presumably with her abductor when she called her mother at work and lied about being at choir tryouts. This is a bit confusing too, because we don't know if obviously he told her to say that, but we don't know if this was under distress, if she knew that this was a bad man that she was with at that point, or if he was kind of like, oh, well, let's call your mom just so she doesn't worry and, tell her that you're at choir tryouts while we're shopping. You know what I mean?
Oh, because you don't want to be like, oh, I'm out getting you something.
Yeah. Regardless, Amy was also not the type of kid to lie just for fun. Profilers say that this sort of move, allowing or even telling the captive to call their family, is obviously quite rare and reflects a confidence in the abductor and his ability not to get caught. Perhaps this could also suggest that it was not the first or the last time he had or would do something like this. He would have had to have been a very adept manipulator and be able to talk comfortably to young girls. And when I heard this, it reminded me of the book The Killer Across the Table, written by John Douglas, which I've mentioned a couple times because I just recently read it. He talked about a kind of a similar situation to this. There was a little girl that was 7, I think, and she was murdered by her neighbor who was a teacher. He was like a high school teacher. John Douglas, when he interviewed the murderer, he had mentioned that since he was a teacher, it would have been easy for him to command the little girl to do what he wanted her to do because he had that authority.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought maybe this person was a teacher or worked with kids in some capacity or another.
That's a good point too, because you'd be way more comfortable going with a teacher to do something like that than someone that's like, well, I work with your mom and I know this about your mom, so that's really all you can be like, okay, well, he's not lying because clearly he knows she got to promote whatever.
Well, even if she didn't know that he was a teacher, but just that he has that skill of being able to talk to and connect to kids.
Oh, okay, yeah.
When Amy told her friends about the man on the phone, she never expressed, implied, or inferred that he made her feel uncomfortable or that she felt unsafe going with him. Law enforcement believe the perpetrator was or is a local to the area or knows it as well as a local would. We're starting to go down the rabbit hole a little bit here. So, a few months before Amy's abduction, a girl who we'll call A Okay? This letter is based on absolutely nothing. It's just the first letter in the alphabet, so that's why we're using it. Her real name, she doesn't want to be publicly identified, so we're just going to call her A. A lived a few towns over from Bay Village, and she came forward saying that she received a phone call from an unknown man that was very similar to the call that Amy got. A's story goes that she was babysitting her younger brother, who was around 7 or 8, when she noticed he was on the phone with someone. And she said that he was on the phone with this person for, like, kind of a long time. So she asked him who he was talking to, and he just kind of shrugged and was like, yeah, I don't know. Obviously, she took the phone from her brother, and she said the man on the other end of the line told her that he was an old friend of their mother's and was wondering if her or her brother would like to go with him to help pick out a present for their mom. She was around like 16 or 17, so she was older.
Yeah.
So she immediately knew something was weird with this, and she called her mom, who said she did not know that man, and the family filed a police report on the incident that same day. During investigation, it was uncovered that A was actually an equestrian as well. Where do you think she rode her horses?
You can only take a guess.
Yep, Holly Hill Farms.
Yep.
A thinks that whoever this man was could have gotten their family's phone number or other personal information from the files at Holly Hills. So this is really sad, but 7 years prior to the phone call, when she was 14, she had been sexually assaulted by someone that she didn't know. After the attack, he had taken from her horse head earrings that she was wearing at the time, which you should probably remember.
Yeah.
A was worried this phone call might have come from that same man, and that he now knew her phone number and where she lived, so she was really kind of shaken up by that. 2 sisters around the same age as Amy, we'll call them B and C. They were from another town about 15 minutes from Bay Village, so it's a separate one from A.
Yeah.
And they reported getting suspiciously similar phone calls as well. So B said in the Lake Erie Murders documentary, quote, "The man said that he worked with my mom, and he asked how old I was, who my friends were, what I liked to do. I just thought, oh, he's a nice guy. He's friends with my mom, and he wants to buy her a present." C said that she was immediately worried by the call and scared of the man, and that he was going to come to their house. B recalled that the man must have known when they were alone because the calls only came when their mom was out.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't mention this, but A's calls and B and C's calls, they all came the summer of 1989. And in total, there were around 8 to 10 reported similar calls made to young girls from Northeast Ohio, all in areas close to Bay Village around the time of Amy's abduction, but none were reported after. Every one of the girls who received a mysterious phone call, including Amy, had recently attended the Bay Village Nature Center the summer of 1989, where they filled out a logbook with their names, addresses, and phone numbers. All of the girls interviewed who received calls agreed they remembered signing the logbook, but the logbook was never able to be recovered by law enforcement. They looked for it. They couldn't find it.
Because whoever this is stole it. Oh my gosh, this is becoming a real nail biter.
Yeah. Do you have any other comments before we get into the next part here?
I know, like, nowadays, they can, like, go into, like, a landline or whatever and see, like, calls that have been made, where the call was made from. I don't know if that, like, technology was...
It actually wasn't. The only thing that they were able to determine was that the calls were local. Because at that point, only long-distance calls were logged like that.
You know, and another thing, too, thinking about how much of just, like, a predator this guy is. Okay, so that thing with the logbook, you said that was at what again? It's called
the Bay Village Nature Center.
Let's say didn't even really have to work there. Maybe he just went there and saw that was a thing, or he did whatever. To take that, like, one, you're doing that, you're stealing that because this is your plan. Like, you're planning all this out. Clearly you don't know these kids or their families prior to this. So now you have all this information, and, like, this is something that would be, like, in a movie. Like, you know, he's going to their houses, sitting out on, like, the street in his car or something. Like,
and
almost
I think it was the 2 sisters. They had said that they noticed anytime they got a call, a car was outside of their house.
Oh, my God. Well, because, I mean, you said, what, 89? You could totally have they had the phone cars, or the Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking
Car
about.
phone.
They had the phone car. No, but yeah, so for this guy to be doing that, to be stalking, like lurking, just waiting to like set this up.
On February 8th, 1990, a little over 4 months after Amy went missing, her body was found by a jogger who actually ran that same route every day in a field off of County Road 1181 in Ashland County, which is about an hour south from Bay Village. Like I said, she ran that same route every day. Just this day, she happened to look over at the right moment and see something suspicious, and unfortunately, she did see Amy there in the field. It seemed that the field was not the primary crime scene, meaning she was killed somewhere else and her body had been brought there shortly after the murder. She had evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her head, but her cause of death was, quote, cardiovascular shock due to hemorrhage, due to laceration of carotid artery, due to stab wounds of the neck, meaning she was stabbed in the neck and bled out.
Jeez.
Coroners estimated that it would have taken her approximately 30 minutes to bleed out. Hopefully she was not conscious for that. It was clear that she had been deceased for a long time upon her body's discovery. If she wasn't killed on October 27th, she was not kept alive very much longer after that. Most likely, some people think that she could have been alive longer, but anyways. There were gold fibers found on her body that would have probably come from a carpet or a rug. And it looked like she was undressed, then redressed at some point. There was blood found in her underwear, which she was also now wearing inside out. This very likely could mean she was sexually assaulted, but that could not be positively determined beyond what I just told you.
Yeah.
Some of her belongings that she had with her that day were not recovered with her body and are presumed to have been taken by her murderer as quote-unquote trophies. These items were her riding boots, her backpack, her binder, and her earrings, which were shaped like horse heads. There was a green curtain or like blanket of some sort that her body was believed to have been wrapped in at some point, and it was found a few hundred yards away from Amy in that same field. DNA likely belonging to the killer was taken from her body, which will hopefully lead to a match one day, but as of recording on August 7th, 2021, her killer has never been identified. Over 30 years.
That's so wild.
It's so crazy, but we're just getting started. We're only halfway through my notes. Do you want to talk about some of the suspects?
Yeah. Yes, please.
All right. There are literally hundreds of suspects. I only have 5 suspects that we're going to talk about. James Renner's book alone, I think there's like 7 or 8 that I wasn't even able to get into all of them. If you read the book, if you watch the documentary, there's suspects that are mentioned in one that aren't mentioned in the other, and vice versa. And there are so many suspects in this freaking case. Nobody knows who did this, okay? There's sometimes you have these unsolved murders, or like the Amy Bradley case that we always kind of talk about, where it's, she disappeared, but we kind of know what ended up happening to her, what the most likely scenario was. Here, this case is just not like that at all. Nobody knows. It's such a solvable crime that it just makes you want to pull your hair out. So.
Yeah, it's blowing my mind, really. The fact that, like, they had found, you said it was like a green curtain a couple hundred feet away from her body.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, at that point, like, yeah, they had accurate enough DNA testing. It's like, how?
Well, here's the thing about that, and I was going to say it later, but I'll just say it now. A picture of the curtain is going to be on the Instagram. If you have any connection to the area, look at it, see if you recognize it at all, because they are actively looking for somebody to identify where this curtain came from, or blanket. It's kind of a distinct looking garment, whatever it is. This is actually kind of crazy, but again, frustrating, because it's like, okay, you could do that, but you can't freaking find out who her killer is. They were able to find hairs from her dog on there, so they knew that she was wrapped in it.
Hairs from her dog?
Yeah. So, like, Maury, our dog Maury, well, Gabe's dog Maury, he sheds like crazy. I'm always finding his hairs on my clothes.
Oh,
so that's how they found out.
Yeah, I'm sitting here like, the guy took her and the dog?
No. That's how they were able to conclusively link Amy to that green fabric.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about the suspects. I've got 5 of them here, and these are the 5 that I thought had the most information and the most convincing arguments around whether or not they could be the guy. I'm going to say their names, except for the last one.
What?
Although his name is out there. Just because, well, we'll get to it.
Okay.
All of the names of these suspects were taken from Renner's book. I think some of them were pseudonyms, so just keep that in mind. Also, everything is alleged. We are not, officially accusing anybody. We are not lawyers. This is all... See disclaimer at the beginning.
Yep.
So, Harold Bound was the son of the owners of Holly Hill Farms, and he was also the caretaker of the grounds during the time Amy was going there. Other girls who rode horses at Holly Hill remember Bound kind of seeming creepy, but he was mostly harmless. He would just kind of wander around the farm quietly. He was a Vietnam vet and also a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic who supposedly had an extensive collection of firearms in his apartment, which was right in the middle of the Holly Hills property. From what I can understand, let's say there was the welcome building where you would sign in and have the reception desk and everything. I think his apartment was on top
upstairs.
of that. Yeah, I think. For James Renner's book, he actually talked to Bound's brother named Greg, who told him, quote, "Yes, my brother is the main suspect in the abduction of Amy Mihaljevic." Greg told Renner that the FBI was looking for a blue truck and that Harold had access to the blue truck owned by the farm. So I do want to make a note that there is some back and forth on what kind of car Amy was driven off in. And the answer to that question is nobody saw it. At least publicly, the FBI, law enforcement, they have never publicly named a vehicle or the color of a vehicle or anything like that that is connected.
Yeah.
Maybe this Greg had some sort of insider information. Maybe he's just pulling that out of nowhere. I don't know, but I do want to point that out. And Greg also says that on October 27th, Harold had returned home with the truck very late. And shortly after being investigated by the FBI, Bound checked himself into a VA hospital for mental health treatment. Renner actually spoke to Harold himself for his book about the case, who at first claimed he did not remember ever seeing Amy at the farm. But later in the conversation, he admits that he remembered seeing Amy get dropped off at the farm by her mom. So he was watching from his apartment and walked down to ask her if she needed help putting her riding boots on. But she wouldn't talk to him, so he left her alone and went back to his apartment. Kind of a huge difference from what he had said before.
Yeah.
A fellow writer and friend of Amy's at the time who was interviewed for the Lake Erie Murders documentary said that he, quote, did pay a special amount of attention to Amy. FBI agent Dick Wren told Renner, quote, if Harold was somebody we felt was responsible, we would have spent a lot more time with him than we did. So that's what he had to say about it. Next suspect, or person of interest, we'll say, is named Brad Harvey, at least in Renner's book again. This man was pointed out by Jean Sabo, again, mother of Christy Sabo, Amy's friend, and a neighbor of the Mihaljevics. She pointed him out because he looked a lot like the composite sketch. He was a handyman who had very recently been working on a house in the same neighborhood as the Sabos and the Mihaljevics. He had a verifiable alibi, but Jean noticed that he started to regularly attend services at her church after Amy went missing, several times a week. Renner questioned some of Harvey's neighbors about him, and they said he watched porn loudly, picked on kids, and walked around his house naked when children were outside. So,
ew, the hell?
Yeah, stand-up guy for sure.
Yeah, he should have been a sit-down guy.
Yeah. Wren said about Harvey for Renner's book, during the course of the investigation, you do as much as you can to confirm alibis. We took the time necessary to check out Brad Harvey's alibi. We only took that effort with people who were particularly interesting for one reason or another. For Renner's book, he talked to a shopkeeper named Paula Varney, and we're going to talk about her a little bit more later because she had some information about another suspect that we're going to talk about, actually. By the way, Paula Varney, her shop is in Ashland County by where her body was found. So she told Renner, quote, "A guy from Bay Village came in here on his way to visit his aunt. He saw the poster of Amy and then the composite sketch of her kidnapper that I had hanging behind the cash register. He said, 'Yeah, I know that guy.' He said a cop was involved in it and said Amy was held at the cop's house. Then he grabs his pad of paper and draws me a map." And Varney actually gave the map to Renner, who later realized that the map points to the house where Harvey had grown up, which happened to be very close to the shopping plaza Amy was taken from. Do you want to guess what maybe Harvey's father's occupation was?
Tell me.
He worked for the Cleveland Police Department. In the book, Renner describes going to the very house the map pointed to, where the Harvey family once lived. He says he looked through the windows and into one of the rooms and found something that seemed a little suspicious, and I'm not going to say what he found because I want you to read the book. So go read the book.
No.
I'll tell you later,
okay.
But for the recording...
I get to know.
Go read the book. It's really interesting. There's tons of little cool tidbits that he found from really pounding the pavement, investigating, trying to find out who killed her. We're moving on to the next suspect. So in Renner's book, he details a tip a man named Bill gave him about another man named Al Matlock. Here is Bill's story from the book. Again, I'm going to quote it, but it's not an exact quote. I edited it a little bit for brevity. So he says, "Al was picked up and questioned by the cops. When they found that girl's body, Al was at the log cabin a couple 100 yards away. His cousin lived there at the time. We got pot in that cabin from Al's cousin one time. If you watch the news footage from that day, they were shooting the field from a helicopter, and you can see Al's white Ford Pinto parked at the cabin. Anyway, a couple weeks after they found the body, me and Al went out and got some beer or something like that, and I was in the passenger seat of that white Ford Pinto. After a while, I noticed we were stopped. He said, 'This looks like a good place to smoke a joint.' So we started smoking, and then Al says..." Now, I'm going to say what Bill said Al said. This is not something that I would ever say personally. It's very disgusting. I don't even want to say it, but okay. Bill says, Al said, "That's where they found that little bitch. That's where they found that little whore. That little tramp." Well, I started to sober up real quick when he says that, and that's when I noticed he has us parked next to the place where they found her body. I said, "What? What are we doing here? They're watching this spot. Get me out of here now. We'll go to jail if we sit here." "Ah, she's dead and forgotten about," he says. "From that day on, it's bothered me. Why would he even talk about her like that?"
That is the most suspicious... What?
I mean, he said it best. Why would he even talk about her like that?
Why would you go there? That's shocking.
Right?
Wow.
Renner also details the account of his full interaction with the shopkeeper in Ashland County named Paula Varney, the same person we talked about a moment ago. So this is another quote from the book, this time said by Paula Varney. "Well, it's a little complicated, but let me try to explain. There's a woman here named Pat. Pat was over at the house of a woman named Joan one day, not far from County Road 1181. While Pat was at Joan's, Margaret Mihaljevic showed up selling raffle tickets. She knew Joan from when Joan lived in Bay Village, but Pat thought Margaret also knew Joan's friend Bud. Bud lived in a log cabin at the corner of County Road 1181, and he was Alvin Matlock's uncle. You should know there's another Matlock, Doyle Wayne Matlock. He lived with Bud, and he called himself Alvin sometimes. He told everyone around here his older cousin killed Amy." Varney also told Renner that, quote, "The day Joan died, she told Pat that they'll find out it was Bud's boy that killed Amy. During Renner's investigation, he found out that Wayne Matlock was on trial at the time, and he was eventually convicted for stabbing his girlfriend to death." Matlock had been questioned about Amy, but nothing about his involvement was able to be proven or ruled out.
That's a tricky one, because yeah, it's totally possible, but one, this doesn't sound like a group thing. This doesn't sound like there were multiple guys doing this. And I'm sorry, but these guys do not sound like the most intelligent individuals. Like getting stoned and drinking beer and acting the way they do.
This Matlock person who, it's not even clear if we're really talking about Alvin Matlock or
Bud
or Wayne Matlock
or Wayne
or Bud. The thing that's the biggest credibility point to me is what Paula said about how Pat was at Joan's and Joan knew Margaret and Margaret knew, like, how, you know, that whole thing. That actually makes it a little bit more credible to me, because if it was something fake, then why wouldn't you just say, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyways, the next suspect, his name is Billy Strunak. He lived in Fairview Park and was a frequent volunteer at the Amy Center. He was actually asked by law enforcement to leave because of his criminal history, which included disseminating material harmful to children, and also because of his general inappropriate behavior at the center. He was like making everybody uncomfortable. In reference to that prior charge, Strunak sent several small gifts to a 16-year-old waitress at a restaurant he was frequenting at the time. He attempted to assault her in the parking lot once, but failed, thankfully. And after the attempt, sent her pages from a porn magazine, clipped out letters from newspapers and other magazines, and spelled out her name. So like classic ransom note style, you know? And he spelled out her name over the women and spelled out his own name over the men in this porn magazine and sent it to her. Her father actually saw this and he was not having that. So he, reported it, and he got in trouble for it and whatnot. Other volunteers thought he was inappropriately interested in the case of Amy Mihaljevic. He would end up stealing merchandise from his job at BJ's Wholesale Club.
Oh.
Yeah. Which is where we used to work.
Glad I don't.
That's where we met.
Yep.
So he would steal merchandise from his job there, and he would send them to the Mihaljevics, specifically Margaret. Once he sent Margaret 2 pieces of jewelry. Some sources said it was a necklace, other people said it was like a brooch. But regardless, he attached a note that said, "Here's a trinket for you, and one for your daughter when she's found." Because at this point, they're still looking for her. They don't know that she died. They don't know anything like that. They're still looking for her.
Oh.
But he would behave strangely at the volunteer center. He was observed by the volunteers there, kind of like running his fingers over the picture of her, like kind of like stroking her face. And asking other volunteers morbid questions like, what do you think her last hours were like? Which, again, this was before her body was found. They were still looking for her. Margaret would stop by the Amy Center frequently. I think they said like at least once or twice a week during the search for her. And Billy once offered to clean her house for free, just out of the blue. Why would he want to do that? I don't know. I have my suspicions, but I don't know. He also hugged Margaret once and refused to let her go. Like he wouldn't. He kept like holding on to her.
I need this.
Literally. So law enforcement agreed that he did fit the criminal profile.
Just a little bit.
He looked a lot like the composite sketch. He was 35 years old, 5'6", and had thinning brown hair and a hairstyle that closely resembled the one the man in the sketch wears. He sometimes wore round glasses, but not always. It was found that there was surveillance footage of him at a bank about 10 minutes from Bay Village on the day of Amy's abduction. Jeff, Billy's brother, said that Billy had been at the bank with his mom that day and spent the rest of the day with his parents until dinner. The very day Amy's body was found 4 months after her disappearance, Strunak decided to voluntarily admit himself to a mental hospital. 11 days later, which I just want to point out, Amy had turned 11 in December. Is that a coincidence? On February 19th, he woke up and he wrote a note addressed to his family. Then he took out a can of pop or soda, but I felt it was important to say pop, especially since this case happened in Ohio.
It's pop, not soda.
Regardless, he took out a can of, I think it was like Coca-Cola from the fridge, and poured dry gas into the can before drinking it down. Do you know what dry gas is?
Dry gas?
Yeah. You like put it in your car. I actually don't like fully know what it is.
No.
Yeah.
I've never...
Well, it's highly toxic, whatever it is.
Yeah.
He kind of like drank a little bit of it, but must have gotten scared or whatever.
Yeah.
So he didn't drink the full can. He just set it on the counter and he crumpled up the note, threw it away, and went to his shift at BJ's. He was taken to the hospital around 6 p.m. by his brother Gary. Billy told the doctors there that he was only depressed and made no mention of ingesting dry gas, which he had done that morning. He lost consciousness eventually, and doctors found the lethal dose of methanol in his stomach, but by then it was much too late. He passed away February 21st, 2 days later. Renner was able to speak with Gary, who told him, quote, everybody in the family thinks he did it. Renner talked to a woman who worked at the Amy Center and said she knew Billy from there. This is an interesting story. She said he grew quite attached to her and would offer her favors, like babysitting her son for free. He started bringing her presents until she politely told him that was inappropriate because she was married, which of course he already knew. After that, she told Renner, quote, I found a dead cat on the hood of my car. I also got a lot of hang-up calls at home. He sent me letters that said stuff like, I'd rather die than hurt you. The guy was obsessed with me. The dead cat, though, that was the last straw, because it was my cat. And its neck was snapped, and it was left for me. Around that same time, someone pooped on my porch. She also revealed to Renner that one night, Margaret threw a get-together after Amy's body was found, which kind of, like, sounds weird, but it wasn't a party. It was kind of like a get-together to thank everybody at the Amy Center for their dedication in the search and all their time and everything. Yeah. Billy was not invited, but Stephanie says he showed up to confront her while she was leaving the Mihaljevic home for her car. She said he knocked her out, put her in his van, drove her somewhere where he sexually assaulted her inside his van.
What?
She said he took her home after that, and she gave birth to a baby 9 months later, who she gave up for adoption from birth. She didn't even see the baby.
Gosh.
While I personally believe this woman's story, it must be pointed out that the woman did not feel safe coming forward to law enforcement at the time, so there is no legal record or technical quote-unquote proof that this is true. And police ruled out Strunak as a suspect because there was no evidence linking him to the crime. Yes, he was behaving strangely and inappropriately at the center, but he had a history of mental illness. Around the same time, he was having relationship problems with his girlfriend, and he also had a lifelong struggle with a severe case of the skin condition psoriasis. His family says all of this was taking just a huge toll on his mental health. Billy's recovered suicide note has never been released to the public, but information that has been released, and people like FBI agents and the family did read it, they've all said that, well, some people have said Amy's not mentioned in it at all. Other people say Amy's name was not mentioned in it. Okay, but just because her name wasn't mentioned in it,
what does that mean?
You know, I don't know if that's like just a typo or lost in translation or what, or if there's something significant there, but I wanted to point it out. So no evidence was found in his apartment, but there are conflicting reports on who searched the apartment first. Was it law enforcement or the family? Robert Ressler, whose name you probably don't recognize, but he is a former FBI criminal profiler and former partner to the renowned FBI criminal profiler John Douglas, whose book Mindhunter was adapted as a TV show for Netflix.
It's one of my favorite shows ever. The
character Bill Tench from the TV show was based on Robert Ressler.
Oh, what? Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah, I knew you'd like that, so I had to include that. In 1992, Ressler wrote a book called Whoever Fights Monsters, My 20 Years Tracking Serial Killers for the FBI, and he details the murder and everything, and he believes Strunak to be the most likely candidate for the murder. In his book, he says the Strunak family cleared out Billy's apartment before the FBI were able to, and one of the actual agents who viewed Strunak's apartment that day was named John Dunn, and he said he had, quote, the distinct impression the apartment had been gone through. Renner actually went to the neighborhood and was kind of talking to the neighbors and such. A neighbor of Billy's said to him, quote, they, the FBI, were asking about Billy's car. They looked in the apartment too, but the family had tossed everything into trash cans and who knows where. The FBI went through the trash though. Billy's brother Jeff says the Fairview Park Police Department had prior access to the apartment before the family did, and after they were done, that was when the family went in to clean it and donated Billy's belongings to the Salvation Army. Billy's brother Jeff told Renner, quote, nobody can defend themselves. We talked to the FBI. They said it was all just a coincidence. They said they didn't have anything, and that's why they kept going back to the same people. The whole family, Strunak family, has been tortured by this, and even if he had done anything, nobody could do anything about it now. Billy had a heart of gold. He was always just trying to please.
Whoa.
I know.
And if anything, too, I mean, that guy, from at least, I know you said there's other suspects, but
We only have one more.
Maybe it's the case with this next person, but I feel like his ability to be violent is like that separator from like the first two guys. They were kind of weird and said weird things.
Well, Matlock was violent too, and he had the connection to the site of the body.
Oh, that's right.
So that's what
What was his violence thing again?
He stabbed his girlfriend.
He stabbed his
to
girlfriend.
death.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, excuse me.
That's what I mean. It's like there's just this constant cat and mouse with this case. Is like, okay, so Matlock, he has the violent streak, has the saying the weird things and everything. He has the connection to Ashland County, but he has no connection to Bay Village. And then this guy has the connection to Bay Village, but he doesn't have the connection to Ashland County. It's just weird because it's like, okay, this guy, he's looking real good right now, but then you see this other guy and he's got something that guy doesn't have, but
it's so confusing.
It just goes back and forth. After publishing his book, Renner got a tip from somebody who attended a local middle school. It was not in Bay Village. I think he said it was Amherst Middle School, but it didn't go back and look. I'm sorry. The former student at this middle school thought that the science teacher they had seemed suspicious in hindsight. Apparently, this teacher was frequently at the nature center. So we're coming back around to the nature center. And this teacher was even a volunteer there at one point. He would offer extra credit to students who went in their free time.
And a teacher?
And a teacher.
How you were saying the whole thing earlier about...
Yeah, which I was kind of proud of myself because I was like... In the Lake Erie Murders documentary, Renner says this man was investigated by police and vehemently denied even knowing that a nature center existed, despite witnesses he's interviewed that worked with him there or that were students of his saying otherwise.
He denied knowing that there was...
even a nature center at all.
Oh my gosh.
Renner also found out that at the time, this man had been living only 2 miles from where Amy's body had been found, and according to him, is, quote, a dead ringer for the composite sketch. According to this man's previous employers that Renner interviewed, he had been investigated at least twice for displaying inappropriate behavior towards students. And many people who knew or worked with him in the past and at the time have disturbing memories of inappropriate or even vaguely sexual things that he has said about kids and students.
Oh.
At some point, he moved to Florida, and James Renner was actually able to track him down. And this is kind of a funny story. He tells it in the Lake Erie Murders documentary. Somehow he figured out that this guy was in a certain area in Florida. I think it was like Miami or something like that. Or one of the Keys. And he literally... this is kind of like crazy that he did this, but he got what he wanted. He like printed out pictures of this guy and was like asking people, have you seen this man? Have you seen this man? Have you seen this man? And
what?
Yeah, and he said that it was like last day there and he had to go on his flight to head back to Cleveland or whatever. And he's like, I'm not kidding. I was at a red light and I saw him crossing the street. So he was like, "Arr!"
Yeah.
And he talked to him.
And it was
him.
Oh my gosh.
So this is a direct quote from Renner in the documentary and what he said about the encounter. Quote, it all comes down to whether or not this teacher was at that nature center. And the police, when they questioned him, told me that he said he wasn't. And I knew that he was because the students told me he was. And so I bluffed him and I said, what would you tell me if I told you I have a picture of you with one of your students at the nature center? And he thought for a second, and here's exactly what he said, word for word. I never told the police that I wasn't there. I only told them I don't remember being there. And so I asked him, what else don't you remember? And that's when he said, I'm done talking. I kind of found this late in my research, so I wasn't able to fully go into this, but at least in the Lake Erie Murders documentary, which came out in 2019, James Renner said that this guy was his favorite candidate. I mean, honestly, I hate to disagree with you, Mr. Renner. I know you know a lot more about this case than I do, but I cannot get past your neck. I think he did it. Really? What do you think?
My mind is in a frenzy at the moment.
I don't think I mentioned it, but I will leave a more in-depth article Renner wrote about this suspect and his encounter with him in the description. I just wasn't able to get into it because I found out about it a little bit too late in my research. But Gabe, who do you think did it out of everybody that I told you about?
I mean, I think Strunak as well.
Yeah.
Just because of, like, his...
But then it's like, he, as far as we know, has no connection to the nature center. So then who else got all those calls? And it's also possible that, you know, we're kind of going around and around with the calls and you know, everything. But it is possible that maybe the guy that was calling was not the same guy that killed her.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, too.
Yeah.
But then again...
I used to work at Rite Aid. Or maybe I shouldn't say that. I used to work at a convenience store, a drugstore, whatever. I guess it doesn't matter. I used to work at Rite Aid. And we would get weird calls every now and again. I think it's like a fetish or something where you like call a unsuspecting like person and like say weird things to them. Now, this guy calling the young girls, he wasn't saying weird things to them like that. He was kind of like trying to lure them away, which is kind of throws a wrench in my theory, but maybe this guy, maybe he was a teacher, maybe he wasn't, was just doing that just to be creepy because he got off on it or whatever. There's a theory out there that, you know, obviously Amy got one of those calls. Maybe she's just waiting out in front of the ice cream shop one day. This man, completely different man, comes up to her and says like, "Hey, little girl, what are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, are you Frank?" You know?
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm Frank." Mm-hmm. And the other guy, the real Frank, is sitting back like, "Oh, well, I was doing something I'm not supposed to, so I'm not going to snitch on myself." You know?
I did
but then,
say earlier,
Frank, if you are out there and you are not the killer, then explain yourself.
Doesn't want to... Yeah, people don't want to admit that. Someone's not going to want to...
I know, but someone died. Like,
well, especially
I don't know. If I was a weirdo creep and I just liked to call kids to try to get them to whatever, and it turns out that someone else killed one of the kids that I was like trying to lure away or whatever, but I had nothing to do with it, I would feel like, you know what? I've been to therapy. I got my stuff figured out now. But you know what? I was that creep that did that, but I didn't kill her. I don't know.
Yeah. I swear I didn't do it. I pinky swear.
Right. Even as I was saying that, I was like, okay, this does not make any sense.
I get what you're saying, though. It does sound good. I just think, I don't know. Sorry, what's his last name again? Strunak?
Yeah.
Strunak just seems the most deviant.
Right.
Out of the people that you at least told me about, because...
Well, and, I mean, his disseminating material harmful to children, that wasn't like public record, or maybe it is, but Renner was having a hard time finding what that material was, and he actually talked to the girl. So that's how he got that information of the story of how he had gotten in trouble for that. Mm. And I can't help but have noticed that the 16-year-old waitress's story and the volunteer story were very similar.
Yeah.
Like how he was giving her the gifts, and he tried to attack the waitress in a parking lot, and he attacked the volunteer in a parking lot. And I'm just saying, from what the information that I have and that I know to be true, it is unlikely that this volunteer would have seen that and would have known that he had done that before and like made it up. You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, that's like it's super unlikely. Yeah. That's not just...
All right, I want to wrap it up a little bit, and maybe we can discuss a little bit more before we sign off for the night. But after a long battle with alcoholism and lupus, Amy's mother, Margaret, passed away in 2001. She had devoted her life to the search for her daughter's killer and to keeping her daughter's story in the public eye. The fact that Amy was lured away with the promise of buying her mother a gift was, of course, especially hard for her mom. One of Margaret's closest friends remembers that Margaret had told her the morning of Amy's disappearance they had a small argument. Amy had picked out her own outfit and did her own hair that day, and maybe Margaret didn't like what she picked out. I don't know. but she doesn't remember telling Amy she loved her before she left for school that day.
Aw.
Loved ones believe that for the remainder of her life, Margaret internally blamed herself for Amy's tragic death and remained utterly consumed with grief over losing her. She died alone in her Las Vegas apartment, where she had moved to be closer to her own mother. It is unknown the exact circumstances, such as if she had taken her own life or if she had naturally passed due to her ailments. Even her son Jason said that he doesn't know the exact details of her death.
Oh, wow.
Friends and family believe that her actual cause of death was due to a broken heart the day Amy's body was found. Most of Amy's childhood friends remained unmarried well into adulthood or have never married at all. Most of them haven't had children either, and it's just very apparent how much Amy's tragic and violent kidnapping and murder had affected those in Amy's life and the community of Northeast Ohio forever. We have a little bit of good news. There are some new updates from the past few years in the case. So, DNA tested from the blanket. We already talked about that. In January 2019, a recent lead was made public of a woman who suspected her ex-boyfriend in the murder of Amy Mihaljevic. This person lived near the shopping plaza and worked in Bay Village too. And this person even had a niece in the area that was the same age and in the same grade as Amy. Though it's unknown at this point if the niece went to the same school or if she knew Amy at all. On the day Amy's body was found, I guess some probably rookie cop's job that day was to write down the license plate of everybody that drove by. Mm-hmm. And they went back in the archives, and it was officially reported by detectives that his car had driven by that day, that they discovered her body. This is a quote from Channel 5 News Cleveland's website. This article that I'm about to quote is also going to be in the description if you want to read the full article. In a sworn affidavit, the detective said the man made very suspicious statements. According to court records, those included that 1989 and 1990 was a dark period in his life, and that the man indicated that he may have met Amy's mother, Margaret, in a bar. The detective wrote that when asked if he ever called Amy Mihaljevic prior to her abduction, the man answered, "I could have," and that it could have been a wrong number. What? Okay. Police said that when they asked the man if Amy was in his car, he said, "I don't believe so." But when asked again if it was possible, they said the man said, "Okay, but I don't know what the situation would have been."
Oh.
The detective said the man agreed it was possible that his DNA would be on a curtain found near Amy's body, but said, "I did not put it there," and that his DNA would be on Amy's body if somebody planted it there. Mm-hmm. Investigators said the man agreed to a DNA swab and a polygraph test, and police said the results of the polygraph test were deception indicated. And officers conducted a warranted search on the man's storage unit where they did seize evidence, but we don't know what that evidence is yet.
I want to know.
So again, the article with further information will be in the description, but there's not much more information that we have at the moment. So it looks promising, but who knows?
Oh, wild story.
And that is the story of the unsolved murder of Amy Mihaljevic of Northeast Ohio.
That was a journey.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say, how do you say his last name? Strunak? Strunak. I'm still going to stick with him. I think because the one guy...
That's what I think,
Who is it, Matlock? Mm-hmm. Okay. Is it weird that he was on trial for the thing with his girlfriend? Yes. But, weird similarities happen. Just saying, I'm not ruling him out. And then the whole thing with going there and doing that, it's like...
And he lived right by there. Remember what?
Yeah,
when they said
when they were doing the sky view that you could see his white Pinto truck. Yes, but I'm just.
But he has no connection to the nature center.
Right. I don't even know. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Honestly, my money is on Strunak all the way.
All the way.
Honestly, yeah.
I mean, I think just because...
I have a hard time seeing how it could be anybody else, honestly.
And I don't know, the
truly.
whole, like, how sexually driven he was
Mm-hmm.
for, like, that's obviously the power, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's just, in his involvement.
Like, the teacher, I know that Renner was, like, really going hard for the teacher, and maybe he knows something that I don't know, but it just seemed to me like the teacher was a creep. And
you know what, and maybe he did some other stuff that he's just like, I don't want to get caught for that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know the girl or something, but
that's what it seems like to me.
if they could just somehow, for the phone calls,
I know.
some information on that would be...
Yeah.
Okay, even Pachuskin, the one story I did, it was 9 years until he did something again. But this guy, it's 9 years to already pass. How do you...
Well, if he's Strunak, then he...
Can't.
Yeah.
Because he's dead.
Yeah.
Whoa. That's something to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, but at the same time, too, it's like if he knew he killed her, then... You know what? Now I'm starting to just... I don't know.
Are you switching from Strunak?
No, I'm not switching from Strunak. I think maybe it was multiple people.
Now,
Maybe
there
it was like,
is...
well, maybe Strunak was working with someone, and they're like, yeah, like we'll keep her captive or whatever, because he said I would never want to see you hurt or whatever, and like saying when they find you alive. So maybe he knew like, okay, well this person told me, and then he feels like partial blame because the guy, maybe the other person killed it. This is, I don't even know.
That's what I mean. It's in there. Okay, so it was found that I'm telling you guys, you have to read the book. It's not long. It's like 200 pages, and there's so much information in it, and it's not boring. It's like, it's a really interesting narrative. If you have Scribd, I have Scribd, not sponsored, but James Renner actually narrated the book as well. So
Scribd if you're out there though.
Yeah, we're open to being sponsored. But anyways, apparently they were able to extract like 3 hairs from her body. I think it was 3 hairs. They were able to extract a certain amount of hairs, okay? But they could figure out that the hairs belonged to 3 different men. A couple things could have happened here. Could have been that 3 people were involved, maybe more, or it could have been contamination, cross-contamination. Could have been her dad's hair on her, you know what I mean? I guess there weren't enough hairs, or the technology wasn't good enough at the time that they weren't able to... That evidence was used more to rule people out than be able to pinpoint who exactly did it. You know what I mean? So if we thought it was Matlock, then we could test Matlock against these hairs, and there was enough information there to say, like, oh, it could be him, or no, it definitely wasn't him. We're gonna have to do John Benet Ramsey soon, because this case reminds me so much of John Benet Ramsey, because, a little spoiler for John Benet Ramsey, it's so similar in the same way. You just have all these, like, it's this person, no, it's gotta be this person, no, but at the end of the day, you don't know. You don't have a clue. But, you know, I do just want to put this out there, because I mean, this is an insanely interesting story, obviously, and I wanted to include all those details about her, because she just seemed like such a cool person, and she could have grown up to be, like, a really amazing woman, and it's really sad. I also want to acknowledge that this is an open case, and they're actively trying to solve it, so if you have any information, please come forward, because we want to get this solved.
Or if you're out there, Frank.
Yeah.
Speak up.
Yeah, speak up.
Olivia, you really brought the house down this
thanks.
time with this. I mean, that the delivery was so fun, and just kind of on the edge of my seat listening to this. I want to... I'm kind of mad I didn't... No, I'm just kidding. But I'm stunned.
Yeah, it's insane.
And just...
Thank you for the compliments.
Yeah, of course. Well...
But yeah, I know it feels weird to, like, end it, because I don't have any closure for you, but yeah, that's all we have.
Damn.
Thank you for listening, everybody. We go live every Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sometimes it wavers. We always announce on the Instagram when we are going
follow
live.
on there.
Yep. The Instagram is at Clandestine Pod. We also have a Facebook page at Clandestine Pod. And we stream on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/Stefanuchis.
Which is in the link tree on the Instagram.
Yes, but also, would you like to spell it?
STEFANUCHIS.
Yep. These episodes go live. The edited versions will be available on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I think that's it.
I think that's it.
All right. Well,
Thank you so much, Olivia.
thank you.
Of course.
And thank you, audience.
All of you lovely people out there.
All right. You guys have a good night.
Have a good night. Peace.
Bye.
Buttergear.